Good evening.
Good evening.
You are live here courtside with Lawman,
And Carmen,
and we are here to talk about criminal justice and issues related to criminal justice that affect the public.
yes. And we'd like to say that what we want to do is engage you in the conversation. So we would like you to send in questions if you like. You can do it by chat. You can phone a phone number. We'll tell you that in just a second.
Yes,
But the things that we talk about are maybe purely hypothetical, but definitely do not reflect and create an attorney client relationship between myself and you or Carmen B and you.
yes.
And the call in,
If you would like to call into the show, you can reach us at 916-443-5288. Again, 916-443-5288. Or you can comment in the chat.
yes. Tonight, we've selected a subject matter criminal justice and the law, of course, criminal justice and race. And we're the cost of doing business. Because an article came out in the Wall Street Journal um, that, or Washington Post, I'm sorry, and they talked about how it has been $1.5 billion paid in settlements to police officers for different kinds of misconduct, not all equaling
Not to
shootings or
police
deaths.
officers,
I'm sorry, to
victims'
victims'
families.
families for misconduct. Not all of it is shooting and harming, but false arrest and things like that, busting down doors, illegal searches, things like that. And so those aren't even the ones that would probably cost the most when you cause harm or death. But a $1.5 billion price tag just seems to be huge because who's paying for it? The taxpayers, you and I. So there seems to be, and that's what we'll talk about, is this thing where, hmm, if they keep on doing what they're doing, they're going to view it as cost effective than changing what they're doing. They don't have to if they have the money to pay it off.
But it's not cost effective for the taxpayer if you think about it. So it is actually beneficial to us as a society to weed out these officers who are behaving badly.
Right. And we're seeing it and we've seen it. We don't have to go through the history. In fact, today is the anniversary of the shooting of Stephon Clark here in Sacramento. And there was a rally at the Capitol. And it's all done to keep his name alive, to keep the situation alive. And I can tell you, I don't believe there was huge settlements paid out in that particular case. Um, and
I think his children
yeah, his children received something.
received some money,
Right.
probably placed in a
And a
trust.
trust,
Um,
exactly. And I even believe it was the head of the Kings guy who might have put that up, or partially with that,
mm.
creating a fund, um, which definitely occurred in the days thereafter when there was lots of protests and rallies and things like that
And
going on.
just in case we have someone who is not familiar with that case,
Yeah,
perhaps you could just give a
summarize a
brief
little bit.
summary of what happened.
Police uh, began to follow Stephon Clark through a neighborhood. Now, they didn't know who he was or anything like that. It was the bird in the air, the helicopter. But they were tracing him because people had made complaints of someone vandalizing cars and things like that. So um, they began to trace him through a neighborhood, and it turned out that he was ended up in the backyard of his grandmother's home. So a place that technically you would be allowed to be. Now, in that backyard, however, the police on the ground had surrounded the place, had come in through the backyard, and they saw him and he saw them. They claimed that they saw a light that happened to be coming from a cell phone, and they started firing bullets. And many of them hit him, and it killed him. The district attorney in Sacramento decided, after a long investigation, that no charges would be filed. And so we had lots of movement here in Sacramento because a year before, Michael Mann had been run down by Sacramento Police Department with their vehicle. And in fact, that case had been settled prior to trial with a money payout, and I think it was something like $700,000. So there's a history, and even in Sacramento, kind of recent, of where there have been police actions that have been costly and some payouts. So here we are on the anniversary, and we know that even since George Floyd, that the incidents continue to occur and payouts are continuing to occur. So the issue is, what do we do about this, Karen?
Well, one, let's be clear, not everyone who loses a loved one as the result of police misconduct is paid anything. Sometimes there's no money received at all. It's found that the officer's actions were completely justified. And to be clear, no amount of money is going to make up for the loss of a loved one.
Correct. And now the loss to society. I mean, here, if we are just paying people for claims of cops' misconduct, isn't that almost an insanity move of, well, there might be a problem. People are doing things wrong, but yet the solution is, well, we'll just keep some money in a bank so that we can pay them.
And again, it falls upon, since the taxpayers are the one who actually fund the government and fund the agencies that are a part of that government, that is the taxpayers' money
Right.
that is being utilized. So, as a society, we are better off to weed out officers who should not be on the force than to wait until they've committed the kind of misconduct that is going to cost um, the community the settlement amount that may be paid.
Correct. And in addition, it's it's costly on the community when things continue to happen. And so you have to cry out and ask, well, how do we change things? What kind of ideas and things can we put into place? Well, the first place I always go is the voting box. Yet we have to be more cognizant as to who we are voting in, as our politicians, our school board, our city council, on down the line. In fact, on a police commission, police profiling commissions and things like that. There are several ways to be active on those groups. Now, is it going to change everything? Because will City Hall listen to you? I don't know, but we don't know until we try. And so there's this first cognitive change of mind that we all got to get involved in, especially through the vote. That's probably one of the first moves to make in order to try to affect change.
And then again, some some events do require a law enforcement response, but other events that they respond to do not. Mental health crisis is not going to be helped by officers responding who may tend to exacerbate the situation because they don't understand that the person is in crisis. And so, a person in crisis, it may not necessarily respond to um, the officer, even if the officer thinks that his requests are rational, because that person may not even be responding to their immediate outer world.
Right. And we've seen that. I think Michael Mann had that incident. It was a mental health issue. And we see that all the time now. There was supposed to be, or at least the idea, and in some communities they have a mental health response unit where when it's recognized that a person does have a mental health issue, they don't send the cops first. They send counselors who are there, who try to defuse, as they say, the situation and try to bring calmness. Because sometimes that's all it may need to have happen.
Yeah.
Families get very frustrated. Uh, People are hard to control when they're adults and they suffer from mental illness. And sometimes families don't know what to do but to call the police.
But what they may really need is just a trip to the hospital. But riding to the hospital in the back of a police car is no way for someone who's having a mental health crisis to go,
Right.
because it just usually exacerbates their concerns. And they may not even realize that these are officers, or they may be believing that these are people who are there to harm them.
Right. And we got to talk a little about this trauma on the community because of these events that occur. Will it decrease and take away full trust of even calling officers when there is a situation that occurs? So, it's almost like it's a dark cloud and it's going to cover everything. There is no shining star or shining area that we can run to, and when it costs money to the community, now the community what doesn't have the money and resources to pour into it. So it's almost as if we're not only paying the police to police, but then we have to pay for any mistakes that they make too. And the community ends up paying those.
And well, you referred to it as a mistake. It depends. Is it a mistake when an officer purposely acts aggressively towards someone who's having a mental health crisis? Is that a mistake?
Or is it poor training? And,
Or
or
again, perhaps there are some people who should just not be officers because they don't have the personality that is required, which is a lot of patience.
right,
When you're responding to situations where emotions are elevated for whatever reason, whether it's a domestic violence situation, whether it's a dispute amongst neighbors, um, you need to have a certain amount of patience.
right. And with the new laws that we have, even here in California, regarding policing and saying that the use of deadly force only in necessary situations, and which necessary probably should be defined as to save a life, or the officer's life is clearly in danger. Um, we're going to need to train officers to behave differently. There's a lot that's always said about we need to pour more money and fund the police in that way, not defund the police, but fund them in a different way. And we're probably going to have to start those kinds of movements. And it's groups and victims' families and things like that are probably going to have to refocus and think about politically how can we change for the future instead of keep adding to the list of moms and families that lose their sons and daughters in this kind of behavior. Now, you want to talk a little bit about police officers' nature in general, Carm, and what could possibly happen on the force? Any ideas of how they could, I guess, we
Well,
could do
again,
something,
we've talked about how if the motto is that you are here to protect the community, there should not be an us versus them mentality, because that creates kind of a mob mentality or a gang mentality.
that's true,
And what we don't want is officers who are behaving as if they are part of a gang. But we have seen that.
right,
And we've actually have seen instances where an investigation actually reveals that the officers are behaving in a very negative gang-like fashion.
right. Back in the 70s, probably even 80s or 90s, but I remember in the Bay Area, the Oakland Police Department, I think they call them the Rough Riders. They have all kinds of names for that officers would give themselves within these units.
Well, we don't even have to go that far back in time. There were, uh, what, 5, 10 years ago, and
Oh,
not even that long, the officers in Oakland, there were officers
oh
in
yeah,
Oakland who
that's true.
were um, doing a variety of things,
Yes,
including there was a young girl who was unfortunately being sex trafficked.
yeah,
And then there were officers who then participated basically in trafficking her.
right, right.
Um,
And I think you find that in certain forces that's been going on. There's a rogue group, that tends to roam around and
they say a rogue group, but if the higher ups are
are aware.
paying attention, is it really a rogue group, or is it a group that is just being allowed to operate in that fashion? So you have to have uh, the people who are the sergeants, who are the captains, who are the chiefs, who are aware of what's going on in their departments and who don't allow it to continue. We do have a comment from it says
Sure.
police are in a hurry and want to resolve these situations quickly. They want people to comply with
Right.
their orders even when the person is having a mental crisis. And that is true. And they don't
Yes.
realize that a person having a mental crisis is not going to be able to comply the same as someone who is rational and in their right mind.
Exactly.
And when you, again, when someone is in an elevated emotional state, even if they're not having a mental health crisis, there needs to be some amount of patience in dealing with them. And we know that officers can demonstrate that patience because we see it on many occasions when they
Right.
are dealing with someone who is not an African American.
Right. And I mean, think about it when they it's time to do Christmas drives and collect things for we know officers can be very nice individuals, can really serve a community well. So, but it's those times when they're called out because a call out they have probably been trained, and I'm not sure if they're told, but I bet you the feeling is every call out is a danger zone. Every call out is a possibility that I'm not going home tonight. And so if you approach it aggressively, if you approach it in a no nonsense way, you are more apt to go home at night, no matter what may happen, even though your aggressiveness and the way you approach it could actually antagonize things and lead to that. And that's the psychological part that's, I find, might be so hard to train because you're told on the one hand, watch out for everything, watch out for everyone. And then on the other hand, hey, be a nice guy when you get there.
Well, no one's saying not to, and that is one of the reasons for the type of training that officers receive, so that they can pay attention to detail, so that they are aware of their surroundings. And we know how quickly a situation can change,
Yeah.
but that still doesn't mean that you need to come into the situation on every occasion as gangbusters,
Right.
especially in a situation where a family has called 911 for help with another family member.
Right. I mean, especially in those. Um, the one situation that I always turn to because I'm still trying to reconcile it is the Philando Castile situation, to where it's almost as if what more could he have done? What should he have done? So um, I think he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He told him he had a CCW. He didn't reach for it. He never made any furtive movements or anything like that. And yet the officer acted
And
aggressively.
it wasn't nighttime, it
Right.
was during the day. He
His
has his
daughter.
wife and his daughter,
Yes.
or girlfriend and his
In the
daughter,
in the
in the
car.
car. So it wasn't a kind of threatening situation where you could be
2 in
like,
the morning.
well,
Yeah.
it's late, it's dark, I can't see.
Right.
There are three other guys in the
Right.
car, so I'm outnumbered. It wasn't that situation at all.
At all. It seemed to be a normal traffic stop, and which is similar to the Sandra Bland situation. It seems to be a normal traffic stop that then goes wild.
That then the
Yeah,
But the officer is the cause of it going
going wild.
wild. It's not the person
Right,
who is being stopped.
right. So we talked a lot about that training and things like that, Carm. Um, you know, uh, you let's talk a little bit maybe about how can money help. I mean, we're putting out 1.4, 1.5 billion to pay settlements. How much of that money could be totally redirected into training, into communities, building even in communities?
Well, none of that money can be redirected because that has been
It's
paid to
paid.
the victims of
But the
families
next 1.5 million,
have been that have been injured. But again, it is investing in the community. It is investing in additional training for officers and weeding out officers who don't have the personality for being an officer. And it's not just being a Mr. Nice Guy, but it is coming into a situation and not doing anything to make that situation more volatile than what it already is, and understanding the situation that you are coming into.
right? And When you work a beat, you would think you become familiar with who lives where, what's going on where. I mean, you know that just by traveling through neighborhoods, and you don't have to live there. And when you do live in your neighborhood, you know exactly what's going on.
Well, again, we know that a lot of officers don't live in the neighborhoods that they
That they,
patrol,
right,
but they patrol those neighborhoods on a regular basis, and so they are familiar with the people that are there. But sometimes they just have a very negative view of those people, and it may be based on that the person's socioeconomic status. But none of us are better than any of the rest of us.
right.
You know, God didn't say, "Oh, the person that has money is better than the poor man."
In fact, I think he said just the opposite. That it's harder to get a elephant through a needle or something
Not,
for a rich man to make it through heaven. So, I mean, so it isn't
I
that.
believe it was a camel.
All right, a camel. All right, elephant, camel, both would have fit back
Neither one is going to fit through a needle.
then. That's right.
Yes.
So, you
And we
know,
can't blame people for their circumstances. We
right,
can't blame someone that lives in a poverty stricken neighborhood.
right,
We can look at ourselves as a society and say, what can we do
right.
to help this neighborhood?
And why do we have poverty-stricken neighborhoods? So, I mean, I know it's an ongoing thing for a very long time, but when can we start thinking about making it stop? I know our little
Even
friend over
the
there.
even the crow is upset
Yes.
by what he has seen and heard in terms of um, how we have seen officers treat certain people in certain neighborhoods.
Or he's telling us, hey, why are you outside in my space doing a show? So he decided to come down and say a few things, I guess. But it all we consistently and constantly come back to this over and over and over again. You know, um, and it's frustrating, and it must be really, really frustrating for individuals who have to live it every day. Um, and so, I
And
mean, I want to offer people, I want to know solutions. I want to start focusing on, what are we going to do about things like this? What do we have as a hardcore 1, 2, 3 solution, or at least steps to take for individuals, and how can we get it out? Because we're two people. We talking to the internet, and we hope that billions are there, but we're not going to get billions. And so, do we take ourselves and we inject ourselves into those communities and try to teach and learn? Because
I would just say again, if you have a question, please feel free to call in
yeah,
916-443-5288, and we will answer your question.
yes,
We also did mention if you have a question that you want a private consultation for, you can call
right,
Lawman
at
at
916-443-5600.
or Law Office of Carmody Butler at 916-443-5288.
So, I think what we got to do, Carm, is we got to start focusing on what are we going to tell people about solvency. I've always learned from speech class, if you're going to give a person a persuasive speech, if you're going to ask them to do something, you've got to have a plan to solve. So, what kind of we'll probably have to start working on plans to solve situations. Whether and maybe it is a matter of taking the shows almost literally on the road, in that we create a curriculum, we create a presentation that we can take using PowerPoint, even, but definitely speaking to individuals, providing information and resources and ideas and ways of organizing and creating things that actually can make a change. So I'm game on trying to work on something like that. I think what we can do is build it from the bottom to the top. We can take models from other areas and neighborhoods and put it together and come up with some kind of game plan that actually we can take on the road. And what I mean by on the road is now we move into the community. We look for places where black people are congregated naturally. One of them is black churches, obviously. Another could be community centers and things like that. But we talk a lot now, but we are not solving this problem. We see it over and over again, and perhaps it's bigger than us. I mean, the the amount of pressure. We were talking about it today, right? About how, if we're riding around and stuff, when are we gonna get pulled over? And they're like, oh, we got these two lawyers and they recognize who we are, and they want to make the bad day for us. What are we gonna do in that situation? So I think we got to start thinking about something like that, coming up to some kind of solutions for people. But not today.
Well, and again, it's not in a situation that can entirely be solved by the people. It has to be solved by in conjunction with the people, but by these organizations and these departments that have officers that patrol the neighborhoods.
Yeah. Which is why maybe it's maybe it is involving the police, using forums that we can have them help create and talk to.
Well, unfortunately, because of the actions that they have taken, it makes it extremely difficult for people in the community to trust law enforcement
True.
officers. Do you feel safer when you see law enforcement officers at a function that you're at, or does it cause you more of a level of concern?
And I've gone to a lot of them. I mean, of policing things, in the community. When there's police there, we want to talk about issues, and everybody vents, and everybody has a 2 cents to say. And sometimes it's good for venting. Everybody gets to say what they want to say, but I don't think there's healing. I don't think there's really meshing together. We'll talk again. There's, okay, this is something that we can discuss. It's that kind of thing. So, um, but I do think we probably got to start steering towards trying to figure out something.
And maybe, just like I am my brother's keeper, maybe it should become I am my neighbor's keeper,
Yeah.
right? Um,
We watch each other.
yeah. And so, you a domestic violence situation, maybe you're good friends with your neighbor, you hear they're having an argument that maybe hasn't gotten physical, but you can tell it's just at that point, right? Maybe you just call her and say, "Hey, come over. Can you,
Boom.
just leave the house and come over?" Or maybe you call him and say, "Hey, just, before this gets any worse,
Right.
just go for a walk."
Right.
Because sometimes just that level of separation can get the parties to calm down and just think the situation through, and then everybody gets to live another day.
Right. Right. And CC Badger just put something up that I'm actually familiar with that. That's one of the first things that happened to me when I came up here to go to law school. He talks about how he was just recently pulled
She
over. Oh, she, I'm sorry, had talked about how she was just pulled over, and the first thing the officer asked is, "Does she own her car?"
hmm. Now
You
that
know,
is an extremely odd question. I've not had that. I get the
I had
usual,
that.
"Are there any guns and drugs in this vehicle? Well, you don't mind if I search?" But I haven't had the situation where they ask if you own the car, and I don't know how that has any relevance to the stop. If you're stopping me
Right.
because I missed a
Ran a
stop
light.
sign
Yeah.
or ran a light or didn't use my turn
Right.
signal, what does that matter if I'm the owner of the car or if I've rented the car, if I've borrowed the car from
Right.
my brother, my son, my cousin?
Right. The thing is, and it goes back to what we were just talking about today, Carm, about how when we drive behind the wheel, we have to think, can I get home safe today? Is this today somebody's gonna try to pull me over and cause a mess? And that kind of trauma every single day just wears on you. It just wears on you. And my problem with the do you own the car is well, it is never, ever should be presumed that a person who's driving the car is not the owner, it's not the registered owner, and unless you see evidence to show that.
Yes.
So to presume that first and foremost, then you should ask every driver. That should be the question for every driver pulled over.
Yes. We do have a question that was texted from Baca. He asked, "Are there any moves or interest in restoring the right to bear arms for citizens with felonies?"
Felonies. There, well, right now, the quick and easy answers are when there's a domestic violence charge, even as a misdemeanor, um, the federal law does not allow that right to be restored. Now, when there's a regular felony, usually it's gone for life, except for this pardon process that has to be put into place. If there are some misdemeanors and that could be felonies, misdemeanors, then there'd be a specific time zone, 10 years to go through, or dropping that felony to a misdemeanor through 17B of the penal code can restore the right. Now, outside of that, um, I have not seen legislation coming through in order to restore that. They allow them, we can now, of course, vote. We can serve on juries, those who
Yes.
may have felonies and things,
But I haven't seen
but
anything in
nothing.
terms of restoring those rights, other than,
Right.
like Mr. Lawman said, the
Yeah.
process of applying for and
That pardon.
receiving a pardon.
Right.
And not only the pardon, but you have to specifically request, and the governor has to specifically
Grant.
agree
Right.
to reinstate those rights.
Right.
I would note that, okay, Ms. Badger said that was the second time this happened.
Huh.
And then he started, well, you don't have a front license plate.
Huh.
And I stated, I have it, it's in my trunk. I had body work done. They did not put it back on. They followed me for a while. It took everything in me not to go off. However, I said, I've I've only paid on it for the last 7 years, so I hope it belongs to me. That was a good answer. Regarding the license plate, the vehicle code section does require that you have both of the plates displayed.
Right.
So having the plate off of the front of your car does give them a reason to stop you. So have your brother, your cousin, your fiance, your sons, or
Yourself, because the
yourself
internet probably would
put
tell you
that,
how to
yeah,
do it.
put that plate back on, because we want you driving your car in a way that they have no reason to stop
Exactly.
you.
And
Um,
and Cheryl,
we need civilian over. This is from Cheryl B. We need
right?
civilian oversight with power over the police and or the sheriff. Top law enforcement officers can be self-serving.
Yes.
Politicians don't have the will to impose burdens on police.
Right.
We need to police
It's the
the police.
police.
That is correct.
Right.
And there are a few cities that have civilian oversight boards.
Right.
But if you're an oversight board with absolutely
No
no
power.
power, y-
It's nothing.
it's nothing.
It's
Yeah,
sort of like
they have no
bitching. They
reason.
listen to you,
Yeah,
and then they say thank you very much.
and they keep doing whatever they're
Right.
doing because they have no reason to fear you, because
Right.
there is absolutely nothing
No.
that you can do. You can't force an officer to be fired.
Right.
Um,
And even when we
you
fire
could
them,
just make your complaint, and then that's
yeah.
usually the end of it.
And when you fire them, still, um, they show up in another department or something like that. Now, that brings up a great point, though. That's exactly what I mean. Is now we got to start thinking about, well, what do we do to police the police? So we're going to probably have to think on some things like that, Carm, and how can we really make a difference on policing the police that everyone can get on board with?
Well, again, a change in legislation, um,
Yeah,
and
but the
that's
law
something
don't
that we
change
will.
people's minds all the time.
It never does. But
Yeah,
you change the legislation, and then the law has to be enforced. And you use the law to create a civilian oversight board
right.
that
That
actually
has
has
power.
power.
Exactly.
Now we've gotten to the
Yes.
end of our show for tonight, because
Right.
we're on the format where we are now from 6 p.m. to 6:30 every Friday. If you're not subscribed, we ask you to subscribe
Right.
and to like, if you would.
And bring your friends and
And
neighbors and tell people.
if you
Uh,
have questions that relate to criminal justice,
yes.
please see us every Friday at 6 p.m. You can call in with your questions. You can post your
Email.
questions in the chat. and we will answer those.
Yes. We are trying to always stay as an educational tool and an informative tool for those who want to listen.
Yes. And one more comment for CC Badger. She is aware that she needs to have that plate, but shouldn't that have been the first thing out of the officer's mouth? Not does she own her
Absolutely.
car? You are correct. It should have been, but we unfortunately have to deal with the situations that we are placed in. He was wrong for the question that he asked you.
Right.
Um,
So,
but we just want to create situations where they don't. Of course they can always make up a traffic violation, but don't make it easy. Don't give them an easy reason to justify their stop. That's
right.
all that we were saying. Not in
Exactly.
any way was the officer um, correct in answering you that question and
That's
asking you that question.
true. All
So
right.
again, we would ask for you to hit the like button. Remember that when you call in, when you post in the chat, it doesn't have to be about the specific topic that we're
Right.
discussing. As long as it's related to
Criminal law,
criminal law, we can
racial
answer those
justice,
questions for you.
social justice, and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. All right. Take care. Be good this week. Stay healthy.
And we'll see you next Friday at 6 p.m. at Courtside with Lawman
And Carmen B.
and baby girl. Move out the way so they can see her.
Oh, there's a baby girl. Oh, my goodness. All right.
All right. Have a good evening.
Take care, everyone.